Okay. First off, welcome. I'm very happy to be here because when I was an artist, some of the most important things that I was able to participate in was going to lecture series, and they were so impactful about my career. And so it's a big honor to come here and speak to all of you. So I'm going to start this lecture with one image, and I'm going to end with the same image. And the reason being is I'm going to go pretty deep into my background, probably deeper than most people are willing to share at a lecture or a forum like this. And that is because the idea behind that is the more you understand me, then the easier it is to understand my work, right? So it could be separate from an artist statement or whatever I say about the work. It's kind of becomes independent the more you know the person. Okay, so the first thing is my adolescence. So I was born and raised here in Los Angeles, and I'm very LA, right? Like, even though if I've tried to escape before, you just kind of can't. A family of immigrants, and they're from Serbia and Romania. Romanian on my dad's side and Serbian on my mom's side. The woman giving cheers, that's my mom, and she needed to leave Serbia to come to the US and get away from being a farmer and a very violent childhood. And yes, and when she got here, she met my dad. That's my grandma. Bunica, moja tata I moja mama. Bunica, my grandma. Milan, my dad. And then Danica, my mom. But what happened is my father he wasn't diagnosed, but it's pretty obvious that he was bipolar, and his bipolar tendencies swayed from extremely charming and extremely wonderful to violent. And when I say violent, I don't mean like extreme horrors. And my first memory is black. There's no color. The only thing that I remember is just being in a closet and holding myself and shaking my head to not hear my mom screaming for help. And in the 70s, it wasn't like there was services or things, and especially being an immigrant, like where do you reach out to? And a lot of the people from the old country were kind of okay with this. But even people from the old country who were okay with some violence towards their wife, even to my dad, his standards were too extreme. And that's where I kind of got like the PTSD from that. I didn't know that I had PTSD till just a couple years ago, but it all made sense when I was diagnosed. So this is my sister Lily, myself, and my sister Diane. I'm in the middle. Check out them Jesus shoes with socks that my parents put me in. Luckily, I had some older cousins. By the time I got to school, they kind of got me dressed in Vans and cool stuff, so I didn't really get like beat up and stuff. But even though I had like a really crazy childhood and it was really violent, I made up for it in humor, and I felt like I adjusted well as best as I could. And in junior high, like, I was popular and like most are artistic and sociable and blah blah blah, and all these things that actually end up being really good if you're going to host a podcast. I think that was kind of my defense mechanism, was to just be funny and work with what I had to in that regards. So this is my wife and myself in Santa Monica in 1986. So we were boyfriend and girlfriend for a whole summer, and then we went our separate ways. She went to college. I went to the Coast Guard, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how we reconnected later on. So this was me in high school, and this was kind of like what you saw like in junior high. It was cool and fun, and then high school things changed. That became a little bit more awkward. And at the time in the 90s in LA, it was a pretty violent place. Like, it was unregulated. There was lots of graffiti, there was gangbangers, and then like this new breed of like tag bangers and all this stuff. And I kind of got into the mix of that, right? Like, I liked the art aspect of graffiti, but then it got really violent and got really crazy, and so like that was my squad. And like, you know, even though they were hard, like you could just tell how goofy like I still am, like no matter what. So after high school, I was kind of lost. I was a C student at best. Like literally, I was 1 point away from not graduating. I did graduate, and then I was kind of lost. I didn't know what to do. So I read the book On the Road by Jack Kerouac, and I was like, I'm gonna get a van, and I'm gonna get my surfboard, and I'm gonna go to college and live in it, and you know, be rad. And that didn't really work out. And at the same time, I was kind of pursuing, oh God, I can't believe I'm gonna say this, but I was kind of pursuing a career as a rapper, right? Like I thought I was gonna be like this freestyle rapper. But I was actually pretty good. Like I got in some battles and stuff and got on the radio, and like I wasn't bad. But at that same time, that's when Vanilla Ice came out, and it kind of ruined it for all of us white rappers, because it was like, And Eminem didn't come out until years later that made it like, okay, you could be a white rapper now, but I missed that mark. So here's one of the rap battles that I went into. I lost, but I did really good, so it was cool. I only lasted in Santa Barbara a couple months, and I just wasn't disciplined enough, or at all. And I came back to LA, but when I came back to LA, my parents were gone. They were in Vegas. So now I was in LA pretty much by myself, right? And I was lost. And so the kind of the playful tagging and stuff that I did in high school now got really serious, right? Like, so I was hanging out with like some serious crews that had like beef with all these like gangs and all this crazy stuff. And I just kind of jumped into it, and I realized really quick that I wasn't tough. So by this photo, I had been shot at like 5 times. I've had a shotgun pulled up to my chest. I've had a screwdriver pulled up to my ribs. I saw people jump violently with their heads just smashed and kicked in the head, and it got to a point where I was desensitized, right? I was like, it didn't even bother me. I was just like, damn, that sucks for you, you know? And I knew that was wrong, but it was a survival mechanism, right? Like you see these things, and if you were to be sensitive to all of them, you just couldn't survive because you were seeing so much of it. The end of it was when somebody ran up on me and they were like, I know you're from this crew, and they tried to hit me, and then in the van was like 7 guys with baseball bats, and I had to run through the streets of LA, just like a movie, like Frogger, like running through. And if they caught me, 7 dudes with bats just ready to beat you down. Like, I don't know where I would be, if I would even be alive or what was going on. But after that moment, things changed. I said, I need to do something now. And so the next day I went to the Coast Guard recruiting office, and I said, sign me up. Like, I want to get out of LA. I need to get out of this place. And they were like, sure, let's go. Luckily I had my high school diploma. So I was able to get in. From there, that's me, right? Like, it went from that previous image to boot camp, and then this. And I got the discipline that I needed, and right away I went from being a very lost kid into now search and rescue on the Oregon coast. That was key. That was key for my survival. From there, I went 2 years on a buoy tender in Hawaii, and it was like the hardest work, rated one of the most dangerous jobs, in the world. And then, this is my squad. Like, these were like the guys that I could count on, and you'll hear a little bit more about them later on in the lecture. So from there, I got out of the G.I.Bill. I got out, and then I used my G.I.Bill to go to school, to go to art school. But before that, I was kind of in another transition period, and so I got out of the Coast Guard, and my parents were in Las Vegas, so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go hang out with them for a little bit. And I helped them build this greenhouse, and I connected more with my mom, and I always thought I was like from like my dad's side, but when I came back, I realized how much of I'm like my mom. Like, it's pretty amazing. Like, we have this like weird sense of humor and all these little things and this work ethic, and I was like, shit, man, I didn't even know that, And we built this greenhouse, which kind of got me interested in plants and my love for plants. And when we built this thing, the first time we built it, we were putting up the last truss, and there was 2 guys on top, and the whole thing fell, like as it was going. And I was the one on the forklift putting up the last truss. And then my she's like the toughest person I know. She's got that Eastern European work ethic, and she's like, all right, let's de-nail everything and put it back up. And then my stepdad engineered the braces on the side. And then there's me with some wheatgrass. That was what we were farming, wheatgrass. From there, I found a school at Las Vegas, UNLV. And one thing that's important to note about my art education is in 1990, there was a guy, Tarkanian. I don't know if you guys follow college basketball, but in 1990, he took the UNLV Rebels all the way to win a national championship. And that's crazy. That's crazy for that school to win a championship. And it was just amazing. 10 years later, when I went to UNLV, there was an art critic there named Dave Hickey, and he joined the art department. And what Tarkanian did for the basketball department is what Dave Hickey did for the art department. And so now I stumbled upon one of the most amazing art programs like in the world that I didn't even know it was happening. And that was very formative to how I think as an artist and still how I think today. So one of the assignments that you get in like art school is like self-portrait. And so I got like the image of me in the Coast Guard and all these other little images. And then I just put them around town and took a picture of it next to things. And somebody had the "fuck authority" sticker on there. And I thought, oh, that would be funny, like military, like whatever. But anyway. And then I started getting more interested in other people. So I made this like dry erase board, and then I gave them a marker, and I said, just write whatever you want, and then I'll take a photo of it, and that'll be my series. And that's my mom, and that's her saying awesome, and with no E, and she would always correct my English, and it would drive me crazy because I'm like, all right, but mom gets a pass, right? And then I also got to participate in some really cool other art projects with other people. They say, hey, do you want to wear a spacesuit and come out to the desert and shoot? And I was like, yeah, sure, like whatever. And then then they give you a couple beers and you hang out and make, just talk about art. My thesis reflected back on my days in graffiti, and I created a typeface based on graffiti, and it was like the parameters, and this is where like I first started understanding that parameters could actually be liberating in art, just as landscape architecture and architecture has these parameters. So can you set these parameters in fine art to create something beautiful? And the parameter was that it had to work in an 8-point font. And how do you get something so gestural and crazy as graffiti to work in that way? Look at that G, like that's dope. And I'm very proud of this. And one of the other things that I learned in art school, it's okay to be proud of your work. You don't have to be shy. Like if you've worked and you've put in the effort, who cares how you're perceived, if it's hubris or whatever? Like it's okay. Say, hey, I love it, and you don't have to. And that takes a really long time, right? Because you never want to be that. But at some point, it's okay. You could step back and be like, I like it. Kind of where I established being able to draft. I had to learn how to draft myself. And then I really fully immersed myself into the art world. I started curating art shows and exhibitions and really large events. And one of my art professors says, you're a better producer than you are an artist. And I was like, fuck you. Like, that sucks, right? Like, that's a really shitty thing to say as an artist when you're insecure and all these things. And I thought about it, and I was like, well, a couple years later, right? Like, I held on to that one for a while, which you do when you're young and you're trying to break through. And but later, I learned to kind of embrace that role. Now, I don't subscribe to the ideology that I'm better at one thing or the other. I think I could compartmentalize. Of course, that's subjective, but that's the way that I handle it, is like, oh, well, this is this part of me and this is this part. Being able to coordinate with 100 artists and make things work without losing artistic integrity and making a profit, that's crazy. And I was able to pull that off on a very big scale, which all those things that I learned now translate into how I handle the podcast. So, and then if I had time when I was producing these events in art show, I would produce my own work and put it in there. And this is, there's an artist called Man Ray. He was a photographer. He was kind of like the first Photoshop guy, pre-Photoshop, or at least the one who made it, famous, kind of like montaging two images. And he had this famous image of a woman with a violin, F-holes on her back. And then this is my reinterpretation of Man Ray's Violin Lady. I guess that's probably what it's called. Going to lecture series was one of the best things that I did to help shape how I saw the world. And seeing people talk and hearing them away from your professors and away from your peers kind of lets you step back a little bit. It's kind of like your parents telling you the same exact thing and you don't listen, and then someone says the same thing and you're like, yeah. And your parents like, dude, I've been telling you that for like 20 years. It's just like one step removed, and you get to absorb things in a different way. And I went to a lecture and I heard a landscape architect speak, and I was like, that's it. My whole career trajectory changed from there. I was so inspired by that lecture that I decided that from then on, I will be a landscape architect. This is me and my wife right before graduate school. So what happened was I was doing one of these large exhibitions, and I had my suit ready. I had been dating a girl for 3 years and everything, and we broke up like a week before. And at that time, social media was MySpace. I don't know if you guys know about that. But so we got reconnected on there, and I said, hey, I'm hosting like this. I hadn't seen her in 10, 15 years. And I said, hey, I have this huge thing, this exhibition. It's going to be video cameras, and I'm going to be interviewed, and it'd be nice to have a date. Why don't I fly you out, and then we could just hang out and we could reconnect, and then And she said, yeah, sure, I'll come. She flied out, and over that weekend we fell in love, which I did not expect at all, and I didn't even want that because I was already going to graduate school, but it was too late. We were in love. And so I'm pretty thick-headed, and so I need a woman like this that's strong, that's like, hey, no, dude, let me tell you what's up. and that's her. So this was us right before that. And then I said, hey, I'm going to Ohio to go to graduate school. Do you want to come with me? And she's like, where's Ohio? And I was like, I don't fucking know. And she's like, all right, let's go. And so we packed up our bag, and like anything that fit in the back of my pickup truck, we put it in there and we went. I started my MLA program. I didn't do so well in the MLA program. I had a lot of things going on, a lot of unresolved issues, and I've been working really hard for a long time, and I was very tired, like mentally, and I didn't really put as much as I could. One of the things, in '89, my father had passed away, right? And at his funeral, afterwards, I was numb. I didn't cry, right? After his funeral, my sister's boyfriend was like, hey, let's smoke this joint and let's just forget about it, right? Little did I know that I was going to use that technique for 20 years on how to handle any big emotions. I was just fucking get high and then just numb out and then just deal with what I have to deal. Like, I wasn't lazy, I was working, but I just wouldn't I wouldn't process these emotions. And I was like suspended in some kind of adolescence mentally. So when I got to graduate school, like all these big things started coming up and these big demands. And so what I did is I just kept smoking weed and kind of numbing it and doing the work. And kind of the worst experience I had was I was designing this skate park for my thesis. And it was just supposed to be a studio day. And this visiting, hot shot came in and was like, okay, we're going to do a pinup. Let's have 3 people show their work. And I was like, don't pick me, don't pick me, don't pick me. Hey, Michael, let's put your fucking skate park up. And I was so high. Like, I was just like, Jesus Christ. Like, there's like high, and then I was like, just fucking. And I was like, And that was my experience. Like, it was not good. I wasn't handling things very well, and I apologized to a lot of my professors afterwards. I said, I really wish I was there more. And they're like, no, it's cool. We wish you were there more too. We're glad that you're doing good now. And at the end, when I gave my final presentation, one of the senior people in our class, the one guy that everyone respects, the professors, the students, and everything, he pulled me aside and he said, Michael, your thesis was able to put together everything that we learned. And it really meant something to me because I was so insecure about everything that I was doing. And for him to say that was really something special. We'll get back to the skate park in a little bit when I get into my career. The fall. All right. So I graduate. I go through my childhood. I numb all emotions. I ignore everything. I have this amazing art career. I get my MLA. And I'm kind of running away from everything at the same time. At the same time accomplishing these big things, but at the same time still not dealing with my emotions. Right about the time I was graduating, well, not right about the time, literally the time I was graduating. So commencement was on a Sunday, and my wife's water broke on Monday morning, right? So I just finished my master's, and then that Monday morning, my wife's water broke. I thought I was gonna have 3 weeks to relax. That night when I graduated, my buddy was like, let's go drink. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna have just one. How many times have you said, I'm just gonna have just one, and it's not just one? And that was me. Like, I am an alcoholic. Usually if I'm just gonna start, especially 3 years after hard work, I'm gonna put a drinking on. And for some reason, I think it's divine intervention. I didn't. I literally went into the party, I had one drink, and I came home. And I'm so grateful because I got to witness my child being born, and I got to actually catch him and experience that and cry. And the crying didn't stop there. And this is him. And so from Ohio, now I'm in this new transition period, and I don't do well in transition periods. Like, I always need to aim for something. And I graduated, and then my wife's sister said, why don't you guys come to LA till you get on your feet, right? And get established. And we said, okay. And that's where everything went really fucked up. I come back to LA, and now I'm dealing with my son. I'm trying to learn what's going on. I'm not working. I'm smoking weed. I'm drinking. I met right back up with my old friends. I can't handle this dad thing. I can't handle this husband thing. I can't handle not having a career. I don't have a clear goal. I get a job as a landscape designer. I don't really do well. That only lasted a couple months. And I'm sitting here, and my wife's like, where's Michael? Where's the guy who's ambitious? Even though, I was not doing the best, I was still really ambitious and doing all these things and goal-orientated. And she's like, where did he go? What the fuck is happening? And so I'm picking up these jobs. In LA, you could be a PA, which is called a production assistant in like TV or cameras. You're making like crap money, and you're working like 16, 18 hours a day. And I'm working for like a couple weeks, and we have no money. We drained our savings. Everyone's looking at me like, what the fuck is happening to this guy? I'm not knowing what's going on. I get my first check. It's like $1,200 or something. And we were so grateful. It was so much money to us at the time because I was such a mess, right? And so I said, babe, let's go to Trader Joe's. Let's go get as much food as we can. And we do that, and we go and we load up the grocery things, and we come outside, and there's this family, right? And there's this guy with his wife and his 2 kids, and he's outside of Trader Joe's, and he has a sign, right? And he says, he doesn't say anything, but I was like, hey man, you need some money. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, what do you do? He's like, I'm an engineer. I'm from Argentina. I came to the U.S. Things didn't really work out. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking at him, and I'm like, fuck, this could be me right now. This is almost me, If we didn't have my wife's sister's help, like, we would be on the street, right? So I had the cash in my pocket, like $1,200, and I was like, all right, here's $20, right? And I get in the car, and we load up our groceries. I'm like, fuck. I'm like, babe, give me a grocery bag. We get a grocery bag. I start separating out our food. Okay, we bought two things apiece. Let me get another one. I separate as much as we can. I go back and I give it to them. And they were like just about to cry, and they were so grateful. And then I take off again. I'm like, there was a baby there. They don't have diapers. So I went back and I looked at the mom and I said, do you need diapers? And she's like, yeah. I was like, fuck. Could you imagine having a kid and then defecating on herself because you didn't have it together to have them diapers? And, my actions, I don't think were completely altruistic. My actions were because I was seeing myself, and we were moments away from that happening to us. And that was really scary. And that was kind of like my rock bottom, right? And so from there, I was like, I need to get together and get it together. And so I found this nonprofit therapy place, and I was just a mess. And I literally, like, when people say things like, oh, I think I was crazy, I literally did not know if I was crazy or not. I had no idea what was happening. Like, I was like, I'm fucking insane. Like, that's it. This is what it is. Or am I? Like, I just didn't know. And that I don't wish upon my worst enemy. That is not a good feeling. And I went in and I said, let's do this. Let's figure out what is happening. And luckily I had a therapist who was great, and she was aggressive, and she worked with me really hard. And she's like, after a couple of weeks, she's like, you're not crazy. And I trusted her, and I said, thank you, then let's fix this. And if you ever want a sage in life, and if you ever have a kid, you don't have to look any farther than your kid. I have this wonderful boy. I got my shit together now, so it's cool. I could be a good father. That's his third eye. He put a little carrot there. Career. Okay, so doing therapy, things are starting to kind of align. I'm getting together. I'm still smoking weed. But that's starting to subside. And I didn't have a job, and I said, if I don't have a job, should I be really smoking like this much weed a day? And the answer was no. So I'm sitting there at this coffee shop, and I said, I know there's Alcoholics Anonymous. Is there Marijuana's Anonymous? And I was like, that's kind of lame. Like, who goes to the Marijuana's Anonymous? Like, Google it. And there was one right down the street that night. And I was like, I got to go now. So I went, and the room was as full as this, as people who all just couldn't manage smoking their weed. And I was like, okay, I'm not alone. That's cool. And I just quit. And that's been like, I've been sober, like 3-4 years now. And it feels really good. 2 weeks later, I got a job. Just so happened that guy was also in an MA program. If you don't believe in serendipity, I don't know what to tell you. So this is Gabrielle Flad. She was my first mentor as a landscape architect. She's an alum from here, and this is her thesis. And she ran a design build firm as if it was a big, large firm. And so I got some really amazing experience on how to run things like a professional firm. We were really good at details because we were design build. The details had to be great because you would design it and it would go right into the field, and then you would know right away if it worked or not, and you could make adjustments. And so I started really developing a strong sense of construction details. After about 3 years from there, I wanted to get a new job, and I wanted to move up, and so I put together a portfolio. Now, because my background was in fine art and graphic design, I knew how to put together a really good portfolio visually that read well. I applied to SWA Group in Los Angeles, and I got the job. And that was a very big jump from my complete low, and then 3 years later getting a job at SWA. And one of the first things within, from when I got there, I was just doing some basic red lines, and in passing the guy said, he was speaking to himself, and he says, we have to create a planting plan for this job. And I said, I could do it. And he's like, yeah, okay, cool. And I was like, oh, fuck. Like, this planting plan alone, the budget just for the plants, $880,000. And when you get hired at SWA, if you say something like they vetted you, right? And so if you say, hey, I could do this planting plan, that means you could do this planting plan. And so I had never done a planting, the planting plans I did were just drafting planting plans and then just a little bit here and there, but nothing at this scale. And so it's okay, I'm gonna do this. And I just went and I got Bob Perry's book and the Western Garden book and the spreadsheets that, from the last firm that I worked at. And I worked, and I put together this planting plan with Gerdo. He was the lead designer for the whole project. I was the lead designer for the planting plan. And we had the same vision, and I wanted to use dark plants, and I wanted to use a certain palette. They wanted to have a residential field that just came out of the residential design, and everything just clicked. And it worked. And I read up on the solar orientation, the water needs, every single thing. I just made it as bulletproof as possible. And it worked and it succeeded, and it's being built now. It's in downtown LA. And then, since that happened early on at my career at SWA, I was like, he's the planting guy. And so all these planting plans just coming to my desk, and my confidence was up, and I would just do it. And this is what planting plans look like for me. It's a mess, right? Like on the left, it's scratching out, and this plant's not going to work, or these are unavailable. Wrong climate zone, whatever, and just building and building and building. And then on the right, it just looks so simple, like, look, I just drew a couple lines and a couple circles, there's your planting plan. But there's a lot of heartache in it and a lot of love, and I think there needs to be heartache and love if you want to do it right and you want it to succeed. And then, I started then doing planting plans outside of our climate zone. This one's in Northern California, and that grass mix on the side, there was no table I could steal that from. I had to call the nurseries and and find out what's a good mix, and then create my own mix and put everything together. And nothing's cut and paste, everything's custom. And then I was doing planting plans in Dubai and Serbia and China, and just keep bringing them. The more I loved it, it really fell in love with that. And then, of course, we were doing lots of construction details, and I really enjoy figuring out those types of puzzles, kind of like the typography that I did in that design, and figuring out how things work. Paving patterns, I don't know. You guys will have a lot of fun when you get to that, because that's kind of what you do out of school, is because it's very tedious, and it's kind of like a, first or 2 year type of thing. And I got really good at that, and then because I was good at it, they kept giving it to me, and I like it, but it's not something that I want to do all the time. And then I just kind of at the end at SW, I just started having fun, right? They were like, hey, we need this detail for this project in China. I was able to have fun with these details and make it work, right? Somebody else would come up with this design, and they said, we need you to detail out and figure it out. I said, absolutely. And I think this one was done in like a day, just boom, 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 just knock it out, do all these things. And that's cool, that's fun. So this to me is the most exciting part of my career thus far. So my thesis was in a skate park design, a flexible skate park, like a plaza, where if you walked into the plaza, you wouldn't even know it was a skate park, but everything's skateable. And then at SWA, what came across our desk was a skate park in Dubai, right? And I'm sitting here, I'm literally doing paving patterns, right? And they're like, oh, we got this skate park, right? And I was like, hey, I want to be on there. I wasn't on there. I wasn't on the project. And then the project started developing. And I'm sitting here, and they're talking about it, and they're like, skate park this and skate park that. And I'm like, that's wrong. You can't do it that way. In my head, I'm like, I need to be on this project. I pulled aside the CEO. I pulled aside the lead principal. I pulled aside the project manager. All of them were saying, put me on this project, put me on this project. They didn't put me on the project, right? Everyone's so busy. Then I pulled one of your alums, George Kuttner, and I said, hey, he was like he did the 3D modeling, and I pulled him aside and I said, why am I not on this project, man? Like, I did a skate park design. I want to be on this project. He's like, hey, man, relax. He's like, don't take it personal. Everyone's just busy, And then the next hot list, someone goes, hey, why don't we put Michael on the skate park design? I was like, so the kind of lesson is you got to fight for things, like they're not just going to give it to you. Like, if you want it, you got to go and get it. And I have no problems saying what I want and what I need, and I'll keep doing it until you finally just have enough and you're like, all right, here, do it. First thing I did was hire a skate park consultant. I said, hey, we need a skate park consultant. And at the time, Gerdo was on an airplane to Dubai. The project manager was out in the field, I think he was in Dubai at the same time. And I couldn't get an approval. I said, fuck it. I just called him. I said, hey, I need a skate park consultant. Can I hire you? And he was like, yeah, did you approve it? And I was like, yeah, sure. I didn't have it approved yet. I just did. I said, we'll figure that out later. Which is great that we did that, because when we did it, we had a go-to meeting. I did the meeting minutes. I wrote it out diligently. This is what works in a skate park. Even though I did my thesis on it, I was humble enough to know that I really don't know how to really design a skate park, right? And this guy had done skate parks in Dubai, and he knew the culture, he knew what we needed, the radiuses, all those things like that, and we made it happen. This is the grading plan for the skate park. So this is not all of this is skate park. There was a lot of other program involved in it. And I did about 20% of this grading plan, but to me, this is beautiful, right? Like, I could step back and look at this, and I could see the beauty in this and how it's done and how much work it takes to create an elevation plan like this, both graphically and logistically and physically, and how it works in space. And so this is the northern portion, I believe, of the park with the skate park in it. You could see a little bit of the tri-bowl in the lower right, and then it goes through this long tunnel, and then the skate park pops on the other end. Now this was such a fast-paced job, and the demand was so high that I literally worked about 14 days straight, about 12 to 14 hours every day, not including a 1.5 hour commute each way on the train and on the bus. And it's not just working that many hours, it was intense design. And when you're designing intensely, it drains you emotionally and mentally. And at the last day, the day that we're preparing the package to get this out, my vision was blurry. I started having pains in my chest, and I didn't feel right. And I was like, that's it. Am I having a heart attack? Like, what is going on? And I talked to my buddy, and I said, hey, man, this is what's going on. He's like, oh, yeah, that's what happens. I'm like, wait, this is cool? Like, this isn't supposed to happen. Like, I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna fucking die for this company. I'm not gonna die for my career. I'm just not. Like literally, like I said that. I said, this is not gonna happen. Now, I don't like to let the team down, so I'm gonna get it out. I'm gonna finish it. We finished it, we packaged it, we got everything, we sent it out. The next day, I went to the gym, and I signed up for yoga classes and swimming, and I started getting into a meditation program that I learned in the 12-step program. And this is me on the train going to work, and I'm going to meditate. And one of my project managers pulled me aside a couple weeks into this, like me doing self-care, and he goes, hey, I noticed that sometimes you take an hour and a half lunch. I said, yeah, I do yoga, and it takes time to get down there. And he's like, well, maybe you shouldn't do that. I said, okay. I just kept doing it. I was like, fucking what? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna die. And And then, other people were like, I was their hero. They're like, yeah, dude, do that. I want to do that. And I inspired other people to start taking care of themselves a little bit more. And my work wasn't affected. If anything, I was better. I was more calm and I was chill. And and it was good. The podcast. I didn't know this, but one of my friends told me, he says, yeah, man, I remember, now that the podcast is doing well, he emailed me and he goes, hey, I remember in grad school you said you were going to start a podcast for landscape architecture. And I was like, I did? I don't fucking remember that. But I did. And at first, it was success. No. It was a big failure. This is one of the comments that I received, which I think is really funny. It said, a necessary subject matter for a podcast to be sure. Unfortunately, it's marred by poor production, often poor sound quality, and lack of interesting journalistic approach by the host, amongst other annoying bits. Dick, right? Like, jeez, But the problem with that is he's right. It was bad. All of this is true. So I Googled him. It turns out Billy Shears is like some fake name. Paul McCartney's there was a theory that Paul McCartney died and then Billy Shears is the guy who actually is him. It's the podcast is still in really bad production value. We're not doing really well. I'm having trouble kind of organizing it, putting it together. We give a couple cool moments here and there. I was like, I need a Kickstarter. Let's generate some money and so I could do the things that I want to do. I put together the Kickstarter. This is right about the time all the elections were going on. The country was just fucking a mess. People are donating money to all these different causes, and I'm like, hey, check out my shitty podcast, give me some money, and people are like, no. Like, somebody just straight out was like, no, there's more important things going on. And I was like, you're right. And no. And look at it, just says failed, right? Like $155 out of the $10,000 that I wanted, right? And I stopped the Kickstarter campaign before it actually ended because I couldn't face it. I couldn't deal. I didn't want it to not succeed, so I pulled the plug on its own because I just couldn't handle it. So it was like my way of taking control. It probably would have, the trajectory, everything says it would have failed, but I took control of it and I stopped it. I took a week off of work at SWA to put together this stop motion video. You know how in Kickstarter you need like a video that makes it why it's cool? I used up a whole week of my vacation time. Fail. Just nothing. A whole week gone that I could have spent with my family, that I worked every day on making this thing, and it failed. I got $155 that you don't even get because you didn't meet the goal. But then ASLA 2017 came up. I knew what this opportunity was. This was my moment. I know what we could provide. I know what we could do. I know how important the podcast is. I'm gonna go all out. It's in my backyard. I work in downtown LA. I'm from LA. I'm LA. I know how to navigate these waters. And so I hit up ASLA and I says, hey, I have this podcast. Can I get a press pass? And they said, sure. I said, sweet. That saves me $700 right there. Then I'm talking to my friends at work and they're like, hey, you should ask for an assistant, right? And I was like, I can't do that. I don't want to overextend my welcome at the podcast. And then I started writing out a plan for ASLA and I was like, no, I legit need an assistant. This is a lot of work. And so I contacted them and I said, hey, can I get another press pass for an assistant? Sure. Great. So I put an email out and I said, I need an assistant. For this work, you'll get a free pass to ASLA 2017. Help me record, help me do these things. The assistant was Joanna Karaman. I don't know if you've heard any episodes with her being the facilitator, but she is just amazing. She was a great welcome, and she brought our sophistication level up extremely. She's still better than I am, and which is great. I don't mind saying that because one, she is, and then two, you want to surround yourself with people that are better than you. And So when I mentioned Dave Hickey earlier at the UNLV art department and what he did for that thing, he had won the MacArthur grant at that time, and I got to see what winning a grant of $500,000 looks like. And I know the significance of that, because no longer is it just the art world looking at you, it's the whole world. You win $500,000, you have attention. Right when ASLA was happening a couple days before, Kate Orff wins the MacArthur grant. And I knew what this was. I was like, I have to get this interview. She's a feminist. She won the MacArthur grant. She's going to be at ASLA. Joanna has a predisposition to align with feminism. And I was like, this is it. We're going to get this interview. And it was really hard to get. And I had to do a lot of things to make it happen and be persistent and push and organize, but we made it happen, and it's just an amazing episode that I'm very proud of. So I didn't attend one education seminar or anything like that at ASLA. I coordinated 7 interviews in a 3-day period, which is insane to do that much research and coordination. And at the same time, I had 1,000 business cards, and I was going up to every single vendor, every single person, say, hey, my name is Michael with the Landscape Architecture Podcast. If you have any advertising dollars geared toward the landscape architecture market, we're their perfect demographic, right? And they're like, oh, sweet, okay. And then out of that, we got our first sponsor, and now we're making money. Well, kind of. I put a lot of money into it, but now money's starting to come back in, which is amazing, because most podcasts fail, and we didn't. And that was just the first of more to come. And now we got things kind of dialed, and we have people reaching out to us. And these are the people that, most of these people we have interviewed. A couple of them we're in coordination with. And me and my team, we get to speak to all the leaders in the landscape architecture community. And when Greg Miller was becoming the new president of ASLA, they reached out to me and they said, hey, can we be on the podcast? And I was like, whoa, that's cool. Yes, of course, let's do it. The future of landscape, of the podcast. So where do we go from here? You know, now we've established, we have money coming in, we have volunteers, our production value is good, it's not great, we're gonna keep continuing to make it better, but where do we go? So this was one of the most important emails that I think I've ever received in my life, and it says, I am a digital UX designer, but have been contemplating getting a master's in landscape architecture. This podcast definitely, so now we're influencing the people that are coming in. And I was like, wait a minute, now this is a responsibility that we have to take very seriously. And so another shift in my mind happened. Is okay, we have to, whatever we do, we got to do right. So this is Adriana Garcia and Eduardo Gonzalez, and she's part of the team now. And this is how I see the future of the Landscape Architecture Podcast, as me stepping out of it and taking on the producer role. And the reason why it's important for the podcast to generate money is because it needs to be, you know, the key word in landscape architecture before was sustainability, right? And now the new keyword in landscape architecture is resiliency. And so if you kind of like align those two together, things need to be sustainable and they need to be resilient. And so the podcast needs to make about $65,000 a year to have both of those. And the reason being is because it's so much work that eventually it's going to get so to a point where somebody is just going to have to make that much money to just quit their job and do it full time. And now that person might be me, and it might not, and I might just pass it off to somebody else and say, you know, here's a career, and I'll probably get some royalties from it, but for the most part, it's yours. And then that way, our community has this voice that's consistent, right? If you just do it on a passion project, you get burnt out, and then the podcast dies away. But I'm not gonna let that happen. I'm creative enough on how to make things financially viable that this will work. And now this is my wife, myself, and my son, and this was at the first Women's March in downtown LA, and we're doing our thing. We're doing the podcast. I'm a practicing landscape designer, and that's it. That's me.
Thank you, Michael, for sharing your story, and I hope this helps a little bit in your new ventures. But I just want to say that I related to so much that I had to reach out to you and say thank you. Myself, growing up in Long Beach, growing up in the '90s, knew exactly how it was. And after you came to Cal Poly to do that lecture, it just meant so much to us that I think that it gave us a purpose and a meaning of what we can accomplish also. Once again, thank you, and I hope everything goes well for you.